I am thrilled to greet the women leaders convened by the Urgent Action Fund of Africa on International Women's Day to discuss some of the most pressing problems that face women around the world, and to discuss ways in which African women's leadership can be mainstreamed into the post-2015 development goals. First of all, I want to congratulate the Urgent Action Fund for bringing you all together, and I want to thank Harvard Law School's Human Rights Program for hosting this distinguished delegation. We meet on a historic day during historic times. We are celebrating 20 years of the Beijing Platform of Action and 20 years after that historic day when then First Lady Hillary Clinton galvanized the world and the women's movement when she reminded us that women's rights are human rights, now and forevermore. And you're here once again to reclaim that clarion call to action. Today, UN Women call for a standalone transformative goal as part of the post-2015 development goals. The three pillars of this transformative standalone goal call for: first, freedom from violence; second, women's rights and women's capabilities in a plethora of social, economic, and cultural rights; and finally, women's leadership, both in the public and the private spheres. I want to speak of those three pillars in the context of African women and African women's leadership. Today, more than 12 countries in the sub-Saharan Africa have over 30% women in their legislative bodies. Rwanda is the only country to date that has over 50% women in parliament. And that is because of the ways in which women's leadership and women's equal rights to participation were enshrined in the Rwandan constitution. Similarly, the Kenyan constitution in 2010 addressed women's equality in the most creative manner by calling for a 2/3 gender representation provision, which calls for both men and women's participation in parliament. Most recently, Tunisia called for equal participation of women in leadership, in legislative bodies and in administrative bodies, and further included a provision on anti-violence against women. Tunisia, Egypt, and South Africa are unique in that freedom from violence has been articulated as a supreme constitutional right and guarantee. I want to also speak of the ways in which the Kenyan constitution has tried hard to reconcile customary rights and women's rights, and thus harmonize what would otherwise have been two competing sets of rights. The Constitution calls for traditions and customary laws to prevail only so far as they do not violate women's human rights and international women's rights guarantees. These international women's rights guarantees have been made part of the supreme law of the land. I want to take a moment to discuss the impact of women in leadership positions. When we ask for more women in leadership in Africa, in the African region, or around the world, what we are asking for is not just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. The World Bank's development report in 2012 shows in no uncertain ways the ways in which women's leadership, both in the public and the private spheres, pays rich dividends. It has enormous and enormously powerful economic benefits. In Malawi, when women have equal access to fertilizers, the crops improve and there's a 17% increase in economic gains. In Pakistan, just 1 year of education for mothers increases test results as well as mortality and decreases mortality rates of children. In India and in Nepal, when women have equal access to conservation, equal access to land, conservation of these lands improve. So now the evidence is clear that women's rights and women's equality and women's leadership is not just the nice thing to do, but the right thing to do. And I want to finally end with a quotation from the Nobelist Amartya Sen, a world-famous economist who has said, "Nothing is as important in the political economy of the 21st century than the agency and the leadership of women." And I want to leave you with the clarion call to action that Secretary Clinton galvanized the world last year on International Women's Day, when she said, "Women's decision-making is the unfinished business of the 21st century." And today you are gathered here to finish that unfinished business. So congratulations and good luck.